Колеги, ми продовжуємо робочий день. Тема наступної прес-конференції – презентація доповіді групи моніторингу прав національних меншин під назвою «2 роки війни. Ксенофобія в Україні у 2015 році». І першим я до слова запрошую виконавчого віце-президента Конгресу національних громад України пана Йосифа Зісельса. Прошу.
Доброго дня всім. Дякуємо, що прийшли. Це вже стало такою традицією, не знаю, чи добре, чи не добре, але ми раз на рік на початку року презентуємо нашу доповідь по моніторингу і аналізу ксенофобії в Україні. Що змінилося за цей час, що пройшов з минулого року? Ми не можемо похвалитися, що дуже сильно змінилося, як нам було б бажано, в бік зменшення, але деяка тенденція намічається, і нам треба її проаналізувати, що випадків на ґрунті ненависті, насилля на ґрунті ненависті стало трохи менше, і це треба зрозуміти, у чому причина, знайти чинники, чому це так сталося. Ще ситуація змінилася в тому, що почалася нарешті після довгого очікування, можна сказати, майже 10 років ми штурхали наші державні органи, щоб була якась координація у моніторингу проявів ксенофобії. І ось нарешті цього року, минулого року, початок цього року, вперше у нас налагодилась якась координація. Ми отримали перші дані з Міністерства внутрішніх справ і узгодили їх з нашими даними. І наші експерти вам будуть розповідати про це, бо нам прийшлося навіть змінити формат трошки нашої доповіді, бо ми вставили туди дані Міністерства внутрішніх справ. І це дуже важливо для нас, бо це початок співпраці з державними органами, так як це в Західній Європі проходить, де громади і Міністерство внутрішніх справ або прокуратури, там, де бо в різних країнах різні органи займаються моніторингом і аналізом цього явища, ведуть і узгоджують свої дані. І нема великих відмінностей в цих даних між різними структурами, громадськими.
Observation of xenophobia, etc. in other countries, they cooperate closely with the Ministry of the Interior. Also, the last year, the problem with our monitoring and with our opportunities to monitor was the war in the east and occupied territory of Crimea. It is difficult to monitor situation in those regions, although we try to do this. It is not so much difficult to monitor than to verify the gathered information, because we do not have any contacts with those authorities, of course. But nevertheless, we try to keep an eye on the situation in those regions, although we try to keep in secret our contacts, not in the alone the contact line, but also in occupied territories. I have a lot of friends from Jewish community, for example, in the occupied territories and non-controlled territories, and I try not to bother them by phone without urgent needs. I think that we observe less cases of intentional provocations of those who work either for Russian special services or are involved into the work of Russian special services. You know that there is a hybrid war against Ukraine, and provocations of hate of national hatred and provocations of xenophobia are important component of the hybrid war, and quite often it's not so easy to decide whether it was a provoked case of hatred or xenophobia, or this was an outsplash of natural hatred or xenophobia, so to say. Nevertheless, number of cases of violence based on hatred shows the tendency to drop, especially in occupied territories. This depends on the intensity of military actions, since half of the Donbass population fled, and these are not just one half of population, but these were religious groups which were oppressed by occupation authorities. These were Protestant religious communities, these were Greek Catholic religious communities, these were Kiev Patriarchy believers, and one half of the Jewish community had escaped from the from Donbass occupied territory. As far as I know, this also decreases the number of xenophobia cases in occupied Donbass. When it comes to Crimea, Crimea shows the tendency to growth of such cases in Crimea. Not so many people left, not so many people left Crimea. That's why the situation there is worsening. I expect that Mr. Viacheslav Lykhachov, Director of Minority Rights Monitoring Group, and his assistant Tetyana will present the situation in more detail.
Good afternoon. I continue. During the last 2 days, we changed statistics a little bit because we started cooperation with the Ministry of Internal Affairs. It concerns with the unoccupied territories of and those unoccupied parts of Donetsk and Lugansk oblasts. But occupied territories, the situation remains tense and didn't change a lot after we got new information. First, I wanted to say is that it's very difficult to find this information and to verify it. It's difficult to find witnesses who can support the truthness of the information and to speak with witnesses, because if a person from occupied part of the Donetsk, Lugansk Oblast comes, so we are responsible for their safety. And there's also an information that international observers do not have access to these territories, as well as Ukrainian observers and journalists. And the big problem is that to return these territories and to stop annexation and occupation, we should speak truth. And when we distributed information about our press briefing, some media only got the part of the information that was interpreted somehow. And we believe that it is important to speak about xenophobia, that where these issues were very acute. We should speak about this in the context of, we are speaking about occupied territories, we are speaking about the whole Ukraine. If we are speaking about the whole Ukraine, I mean mainland Ukraine, we should remember about Crimea, because Crimea is the part of Ukraine. As to Donbass and the situation there, the situation a little bit ameliorated limited. There are less cases of pressure on minorities, but such issues as sexual harassment and some religious clashes are present, and homophobia is widespread, and also these in the family code they wrote, written by leaders of so-called republics, they wrote and stated that gay marriages are not allowed. And as to religious beliefs, they only have Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate and in the territories of self-proclaimed republics. But there are also issues of anti-Semitism that is widespread, and rhetorics of the leaders and of these republics that were not. And also, one more part of this is that people who disagree with the statements on multiculturalism and religious beliefs, there are some special punishment for them, and this is a fact and the result that these republics are not do not have legal grounds. And also, if we are speaking about Crimea, we are speaking about Tatar movement, and there are a third May case when Majlis welcomed Mustafa Jamilov at the administrative border, and 26th of February, when before the Verkhovna Rada of Crimea, there was a meeting against occupation of Crimea. And as to these cases, the occupation power, they react in an illegal way, and the issue is now, and is acute for Ukraine and the whole world, is the issue of allowing international observers into the territory of Crimea, because the situation is worse than in Russian Federation if we are speaking about minorities. That's all. And I give the floor to my colleague, Viacheslav Lykhachov, the Director of Minority Rights Monitoring Group. Good afternoon. I will be brief because you have the opportunity to know about this report. It will be online on some internet resources in the Congress of Jews, and also I won't go into details and won't mention all the data, all the statistics that we got this year, and I would like to point out some ideas that the most important. Last year we presented our report on the 2014. It was the first year of the war, the first year when there was Russian aggression, and the situation was unique. And it was impossible to look at the dynamics because the situation was absolutely different. And now we have a second year of Russian aggression, and we can compare dynamics of 2014 and 2015, and we can see the changes in the situation, what are the most acute areas, and what problems are the most pressing, and of course what I want to say is that in 2015 compared with the 2014, the crimes based on the crimes of the number of crimes reduced, and some cases that resulted into death of the victim. The number of these crimes reduced. The total number is 19. This incident, there was, in some instances, there were several casualties. And to look at this dynamics, the most problematic case in the sphere, these were the years 2006, 2007, 2008. So we observed hundreds of victims, and now we can clearly state that the situation of war, the situation of acuteness of feelings and legitimation of some movements, it didn't lead to the increase of crimes based on minority issues. The situation is not good, but it is less. This problem is less acute, and we can even say that the trend is rather good. And first, it is the result of the work of law enforcers, and we established cooperation with different bodies of government power, including different bodies and law enforcement. And this is not only in the sphere of sharing the information, but also a closer cooperation on investigation, and it's very pleasant to state. But of course, we have a lot of complaints, and of course, we are not satisfied with the work of these bodies, but of course, we have close cooperation with these bodies. As to other spheres where xenophobia is present, the situation is difficult with homophobia and also with aggressive incidents in relation to those who, in relation to gay people. And also there was an accident in Kiev. There was a march and several people were injured. And this was one of the bright episodes of xenophobia in Kiev this year and that year. And we do not take into account into statistics of homophobia because we cannot look at the situation such a way, but we see the problem and we see some improvement in the situation of anti-Semitism, and also the number of cases with the use of force decreased compared with 2014. There were 4 casualties in 2014 in anti-Semitism cases, and this year we have 1 case, and we are not even know about the real reasons in this conflict. And then some provocative elements stopped the activity. That's why the situation improved. A lot of information propaganda was based in some cases in 2014 on xenophobia and anti-Semitism, and it was the part of hybrid war. And in 2014, the situation improved, but remains rather difficult in the cases of anti-Semitism vandalism, and the xenophobia vandalism is rather big problem for Ukraine, and in 2 years we see more cases than in previous years, and it is due to the fact that we receive more information, and also in our society that is hurt and stressed by war. And with the situation in Maidan, and we maybe some broken window or some symbols of Nazis or some Molotov cocktails, they are not viewed by society as a serious problem now. And the effectiveness of these cases is very low now. And maybe by the joint effort with the administration, we reduce this problems because there was a problem in the Jewish cemetery and in Babi Yar, and we tried tried to solve this problem, and now we observe some level of vandalism. But the biggest problem is in occupied territories, about what it was said by my colleagues, and I would like to say that we hope that the work on collecting the information and also cooperation with the different bodies of state administration and law enforcement bodies in the sphere of sharing the information and other spheres will lead to the improvement of the situation. And I have been working in the sphere for 15 years, and now I feel a good attitude and understanding of the problem from the side of the state bodies, and I think that I can speak about it now. Okay, thank you. Do you have some questions to our speakers? So please come on stage and please introduce yourself, and then you can ask your question.
Whether I should go there or I can ask my question from here. Thank you for this opportunity to hear you and to ask a question. Could you please introduce yourself? I'm Alexander Naiman, participant of the Anti-Fascist Committee of Ukraine. From Mr. Zisels' presentation, I understood that there are no court judgments, court decisions against those who initiated xenophobia manifestations or fascist incidents in Ukraine. Should I understand that these cases are remain unpunished? Also, the comment, the Ministry of Culture disagrees to devote at least one room in the Museum of the History of Ukraine and devoted to the history of national minorities in Ukraine. And and one more question. There are plans to publish Mein Kampf in Ukraine, whether this is neo-Nazism manifestation or not. I agree that we have problems with proper qualification and court decisions based on xenophobia in Ukraine. We have problems with identifying vandalism. But the last year, when there was a racist-based crime in Kharkiv, this was this case is under investigation. We can express dissatisfaction how they are investigated or not, but I cannot say that those cases are not investigated. I can say nothing about the museum. I do not have sufficient information about classifying the Ansar Museum. About publication of Mein Kampf in the era of internet, it's useless to apply censorship to any text. Mein Kampf is available in many libraries, just like you can find the Lenin's works in any library at any moment. So I think that future historians will use it. Tetyana Varka, UCMC. Thank you for your presentation. My question to Viacheslav, and it is more broad. You mentioned that in the years 27, 28, 2008, the number of xenophobia crimes was much bigger than now, up to 90 in that years against 19 today. So how do you think what changes in the extreme right forces contributed to these positive dynamics? What do you think really influences this considerable decrease in xenophobia manifestation in Ukraine? There are data which we can interpret in many ways, and each such interpretation is not more than a hypothetic statement. Of course, there might be multiple explanations of the drop in xenophobia during last 10 years. My explanation of the absence of outbreak of xenophobia during last 2 years is as follows: that those people who are inclined to take radical actions, they have other objective to apply their energy. You do not need to invent an imaginary enemy from a Nigerian student in Luhansk or somewhere, but you can take a real rifle or machine gun, go to the front line, and to direct your energy, destructive energy, into military actions. Yarosh is not so those guys should not go to synagogues trying to convert their negative energy. Yarosh, who is not maybe the good example, but Metro Yarosh once mentioned that for me this war is rather comfortable because I had been being prepared for it for 20 years. And now the destructive energy of those guys is now streamlined into positive direction. They are defending territorial integrity of the country. Of course, this might have some negative aspect. They could legitimize their symbols, their ideology up to the parliament of Ukraine, but nevertheless, this diminishes the amount of xenophobia. Alexander Martinyan, I have several short questions. The first is whether you assess statistics in other countries, whether you compared it to Ukrainian statistics, whether you compare dynamics in other countries for the last 10 years. So my question is, how do we look like against the background of neighboring countries, European, Asian countries, etc.? And the next question, do you think that activity or inactivity of the state in organization of Ukrainian national self-identification contributes to the appearance of violence, to the rise of violence, that is in xenophobia, etc. And the last question. What are the groups of population in Ukraine might become the groups of risk in terms of xenophobia and violence and hatred and national hatred? What religious, what social groups, what national groups, national minorities? I will try to answer very briefly Of course, we monitor the work of similar groups in other countries. We are familiar with the statistics. There is anti-racial discrimination group in the UN, in OSCE. We cannot compare Ukraine to the Western European countries. They have different methodology of registering those cases. They register the incidents which we are unable to register. For example, the telephone intimidation. That's why they are able to report thousands of cases of hate crimes. For example, last year in Germany, there were 800 cases of anti-Semitism, including, by the way, oral offense, which is impossible for us. Our Russian neighbors from Sabah think tank had published their data for the last year. They reported 90 reported 19 racist cases, and half of them were with lethal result. In Poland and Hungary, the situation is similar to Ukraine. These are countries where they do not have big new minority communities, but at the same time we are in rather unique situation. We cannot compare it to our neighbors. The second question, how much activity or non-activity of the government bodies contribute to bringing up or developing Ukrainian national identity? I disagree with you that the state does not try to develop the self-identity now. I think the situation of the war and the situation of the last 2 years stimulated this process quite considerably. The last 2 years were the years of the appearance of Ukrainian national identity, and the interest at the state level to different Ukrainian national and nationalist movements shows that the state tries to do something in that direction. The discussion will be after briefing, if you please. The victims of hatred crimes are those who belong to visible minorities. Primarily, these are expats from Southern Asia, Africa, Middle Asia, etc. These are people whom you can easily recognize in the street. The Jews become victims of violence only when they belong to the religious community, Jewish religious community, which you can easily recognize in the street, because the regular Jew is not recognizable in the street. Also, people from Azerbaijan, Nigeria, that is, those who visually differs from the standard population. And this corresponds with the data of Kiev State Kiev Sociology Institute survey. That is, the victims are people, expats coming from Africa and Asia, from Ukrainian indigenous, so to say, national minorities. These are Roma representatives. In Crimea, these were Crimean Tatars, indigenous people of Crimea. Then Iagova witnesses, religious community. Quite often there are vandalism cases on their buildings, and representatives of sexual minorities who declare their participation in those minorities. I would like to finalize our discussion to thank to our experts, to Mr. Lykhachov, to Ms. Tetyana, Bezruk. It's difficult to compare our monitoring results, not just because our criteria and our conditions are different. The conditions are very different. To the examples provided by Mr. Viacheslav, I could add even more. In Germany, where not just intimidation by telephone is fixed, all the cases of vandalism are registered, while in Ukraine it's impossible to fix, to register all these cases. Some years, that's why in Germany they have almost 1,500 such cases. I'm speaking about anti-Semitism. In France, some 800. In the UK, also huge. In France, this figure differs because they do not work so carefully in than in Germany. And the difference also is that in the Western Europe they have two important things which we lack in Eastern Europe and Central Europe and here in Ukraine. There are radical Islamic groups which dominate in all anti-Semitism cases in Western Europe. We have Muslim believers, but we do not have extremist Islamic groups which do this, so to say, job in Eastern Europe. And the second is the appearance of anti-Semitist intellectuals existent in the Western countries. In Central Europe, the similar phenomena could be observed in Czech Republic, where we observe some 90 such cases against some dozens in Ukraine. Of course, this it's not the sign that we are so much better. We should not feel comfortable. We should continue our work. Especially, we should focus our attention on the war, and of course all the cases of xenophobia and anti-Semitism against the background of war, they do not look so terrible, but in these times of hybrid war we should do our best to improve our image as a country, and we should eliminate even those negative manifestations of xenophobia and anti-Semitism which we have. Thank you. Our next